Rick and Morty presents Birdperson. I've never read this story before. Hopefully it'll make Birdperson more interesting. We see him hanging off a rocky cliff. Then we see him having just hatched out of an egg, and already his mother's crying behind the curtain because of his personality. I guess because he's too serious. So it's lampshading how Birdperson is, and his mother's more emotional than him. So she must have gotten his personality from his father. Then we see him as a child, being told to keep walking and called a big weird freak for some reason. The other kids have the same yellow skin color as him, but neither of them are of his species. Huh? We see him try to climb the rocky cliff so quickly after the first panel. Someone says that to become men, the bird soldiers have to find the egg of the enemy. And this is when Birdperson's a young man. That text box should have been at the top of the panel then, so I'd instantly understand that. Birdperson isn't as ready as the other soldiers, and says he's ready with hesitation. I guess he only became a soldier to try to prove himself. Then after he climbs the cliff, he looks over while holding a spear, and we see him on Bird Planet. He says he's good and normal and will become a man. As I'm still struggling to see him as a sympathetic and fun character. He starts flying, saying that it's time to kill some bad guys. Then we see his picture on the cover of a book, and someone with a weird name is told that he's got 400 books to read. Based on the stuttering, I figured out it was Rick before I actually saw him. Thank God he's in this story. It turns out that Brain Kills was named before Rick knew what he was capable of. And it turns out he only has 32 megabytes of a brain. I guess we merely found him and he's an alien, because if he invented Brain Kills, he'd know what his own creation was capable of. Brain Kill says he obeys, speaking in the third person. I'm not sure that 32 MB would be enough for him to do anything, let alone talk, I don't know. Isn't a human brain like a computer? Morty asks what's with this book, and Rick tells him it's a Birdperson's diary. And he reminds Morty that Birdperson died at his wedding. Either this is a parallel universe, or this issue was released before Birdperson came back as a cyborg in the show. Why does Rick have his diary? I guess he stole it when he was spending more time with him. Morty fortunately lampshades that Rick didn't need to remind him Birdperson died, because unlike him, he remembers if he sees someone die. Rick fortunately explains that he got the diary in a box of his stuff, along with a pine cone and mashed up worms. I like that they're taking advantage of the fact that he's like a bird, even though he's a person too. You never see this in the Sonic series with the bird people. Rick admits sweetly that he still misses Birdperson and tells Morty not to tell anyone, since the writer knows what he's usually like. I'm expected to believe it makes sense that Birdperson had bird shit in his own diary, and that's clearly not white like it actually looked from an actual bird. But he's not literally a bird. So much for taking advantage of him being a bird. Seriously, why would this be the case? And why wouldn't Rick clean this up a long time ago? From the smell at least. Meanwhile, after pointless dialogue from the birds, Birdperson steals their egg and throws a spear at them. I assumed the egg was a Birdperson egg, but it turns out it's one of theirs instead, so that's mean. He gets the egg, and it was all for nothing because a Gromflemite spaceship crashes into the mud. And he gets threatened with a vulture alien that arbitrarily has his text bubble be distractingly black, just a cheap way to be more menacing. As if his appearance and dialogue wasn't enough. He says he needs his soul fattened up with age before he feasts on it, and his egg means nothing to him. How can you logically feast on a soul? An immaterial thing. He calls him by his name because he haunted him the moment he was born, and he ate his parents' souls too. This needlessly creepy thing came out of nowhere and doesn't seem necessary. He prophesizes to Birdperson that he'll be killed at his own wedding. And yet I'm expected to believe that makes sense that he got married later. Why'd he propose at all? I guess he convinced himself that Tammy wouldn't be his only wife, and he was talking about his next wedding. The vulture says he'll have a perfect death, but it won't be today, and he'll kill anyone who tries to kill him first. What's the point of this? Couldn't they have not existed? Why is he telling him this? He runs out of the cave as if nothing happened, and sees Rick running frantically. At first I read his dialogue as his catchphrase, but it turns out he was speaking an alien language called Common and was realistically getting it wrong from inexperience. So there's a callback to the revelation from the show that Rick's catchphrase means, "Help me, I'm in great pain." Or, more realistically translated, it'd mean, "Man, what a pain." which is probably closer to his intent when he used it as a catchphrase. Birdperson carries him away while flying and asks for help from his own people. The invaders show up, and one of them is humanized because he says he's still grieving for his brother, who died when the spaceship crashed. And another one is so annoyed that Birdperson said a convoluted one-liner that he was too distracted to avoid the spear. Birdperson finally admits that he endangered his people by bringing Rick here. And Rick uses math to calculate how to throw the egg so that it bounces all over the place and kills the bad guys. I hate that the setting's drawn in blue all of a sudden. That egg was really tough if it didn't break open the first time it hit something. And only at the end does it get destroyed. Somehow Birdperson thinks his chance of manhood was destroyed when he already proved to the villagers that he could steal the egg, so it outlived his usefulness to him. Rick doesn't care and casually says that he destroyed some statues too, and all with a broken portal gun. You know, you'd think he'd make the portal gun out of better materials, but I guess it was hit with the strongest laser ever. I wonder why he's gonna end up friends with Rick when he upset him in his first impression of him. I guess because he gets impressed with how awesome Rick is. It's humble of Rick to give credit to Birdperson as well, saying that without him, he couldn't have saved them from the invaders. It's satisfyingly lampshaded Birdperson, but isn't he boring and weird? Then it sure was brave of the writers to write a story about him anyways. And unlike in Sonic, this is a series that's consistently good, so I can't really get mad at the writers for arrogance and tackling something doomed to be a bad idea. It's certainly difficult to give this a chance, but the sheer fact that Rick was in the story so much proves that the writer knew what he was doing, when it could have been worse. Birdperson surprisingly admits that they're right about him instead of being self-conscious, because he's also proud enough that he refuses to be praised by the likes of Rick. How selfish is he? Rick needed to use that egg to save them all. Shouldn't he just be thankful? He can just steal another egg. I guess we're supposed to see him as not so heroic. That explains his friendship with Rick later. Rick hopes they have some portal jelly. I mean, considering how huge the space-time continuum is, he's not completely crazy in thinking that someone other than a Rick could have invented portal technology. The Zepthurians did. He's offered some actual jelly to eat and walks away with everyone else, who acknowledges him as a hero for once while ignoring Birdperson. He's satisfyingly told, "Shut the fuck up, Birdperson." Don't know why that's censored in an Adult Swim comic though. I can't get enough of the twist that he started out hating Rick, when it would have been easier to have him just like him from the start like I'd expect. And it's not annoying because we know Rick's a jerk and he's coming off as someone arrogant who doesn't care about his feelings. I like the effect where Birdperson's text was made faded to represent the fact that nobody could really hear him over the other people. I'm so invested in this story. It's feeling like an episode of the show. I mean, more so than the normal comic stories already do, because it's finally filling in a hole in the show. Rick's dressed up in the traditional Birdperson way and is called Rickperson, and told that he's going to lead their army against the Grumfmite threat. He's open-minded enough to compliment the clothing, and the comic's self-aware enough to have him lampshade a human being allowed to lead the army. Fortunately, the Elder says that they need a human because their new people-bird allies need to be led by a neutral outsider. Naturally, they'll team up if it means getting rid of the alien invaders. If this was Ian Flynn writing it, they'd argue and bicker the entire time and sabotage each other, because drama. But that'd be too predictable. I like how one of the people-birds speaks informally, humanizing the people-birds even more than them lampshading the stupid rite of passage did. Birdperson seems to act immature when he complains he should be leading their army and he was supposed to become a man, completely ignoring the sound logic of the Elder that they need a human. All he's doing, as far as I'm concerned, is proving that he hasn't grown up yet. He's told satisfyingly, "Quiet, Birdperson, you're being rude." So the writer really knows what he's doing. Instead of it being an entire story where an unlikable character is this epic solo hero, it's about giving him what he actually deserves, paying attention to fan reception. It's interesting, we got to learn just enough about his backstory and life, and now he's going through an arc. It's doing everything right. I wish more of the comics I read were this good. It turns out Birdperson's going to be put in charge of running the Baby Bird Brigade, which has an overly long and stupidly unrealistic actual name. I guess this is supposed to be a direct punishment to him for acting entitled, when he never proved he was any better than the other bird people and just did his rite of passage. It's just subtle because the job is said to be just as important, and to be fair, protecting and looking after kids is important too. It turns out that rather than him actually protecting them, The plan is for the kids with sharp, pointy heads to get stepped on by the invaders. He shows morality for once by asking if they're gonna survive that. Wouldn't he know? He's a bird person. The general says, "How should I know? You're the general." And doesn't seem to be worried about the children at all. I guess they're all reject kids. Kids that nobody cares about. That's needlessly dark. If Rick's disturbed by this, he doesn't show it. And he gets Birdperson's name wrong and acts condescending to him while smiling genuinely. It hasn't been pointed out how generic it is to have a guy named Birdperson on a planet full of bird people, but since it's been revealed that his mother didn't like him, I guess she named it such a bad name for a reason. Then Rick acts sneaky and goes into a straw hut and plans on abandoning the people with his portal gun. I guess it wasn't broken after all and he really just wanted the jelly. 'Cause I didn't see him fix it. It didn't seem like a very advanced planet. I should have expected him to want to do the smart thing instead of risking his life in the battlefield. But I guess I assumed he was arrogant enough to think he'd survive because he's always great in a fight. He has a force field generator. Birdperson ambushes him and puts a spear in his sleeve, and Rick confuses me by saying that the purple jelly gets you Spanish language portals. How are there Spanish language portals? Portals are inanimate objects. Does he mean it warps him to Spanish worlds? Or is it that somehow the reason every place he goes to is English speaking is that he has English language portals? That sure is one powerful portal if it magically gives everyone on that planet the ability to know English, and they don't question it. So that's silly. Is it a magic spell? Because I thought he invented the portals. I guess he's not the only one capable of doing that. And in an infinitely gigantic space-time continuum, it is way less fictiony and meta that Rick wasn't the only one who makes a portal gun. So it makes sense. The multiverse is so huge that I guess it makes sense that somewhere there'd be a place where portal jelly goo is naturally occurring. Either that or made by bird people themselves, but they don't seem to be at the technology level to do that. Birdperson doesn't kill him because he's too focused on making a long dramatic speech to vent at him. So he isn't emotionless and serious. That's more believable. Rick says, "Manhood's a myth, you little creep. The more you believe in it, the less you have it." That's surprising coming from someone who constantly insults Jerry for not being manly enough, including laughing at him for baking cupcakes. Did he change? I wouldn't expect this from him based on the way he usually talks in a way to try to sound cool to a younger generation. He breaks free of the thing he's pinned against and says the real men ignore their pain until they're missing an arm. And he kicks Birdperson. I guess it makes sense that he'd be too stunned by how awesome he was at doing that he didn't dodge out of the way in time. Rick gets sent to the invulnerable blue jelly. He says that manhood is knowing who you are and loving it. Does that apply to Jerry? By Rick's own definition, that means that Jerry was showing manhood by standing up for his cupcake baking and saying he'll keep doing it. Jerry's showing manhood every time he stands up to Rick in general. So I guess Rick respected that? Anyways, I guess this planet legitimately has magic on it if there's invulnerability jelly. This kind of thing is why I found it insulting that Rick talked in the show as if this is the universe where magic exists in the Dragon episode, because come on, there wouldn't just be one universe like that. That's why I'm so thankful that in the comic there's multiple Wizard Ricks. So clearly there's more than one universe like that. Rick runs at Birdperson surrounded in the jelly still, and realistically Birdperson's still able to put his arm through the jelly and ignores the pain like Rick told him he should. So much for invulnerable jelly, right? I guess Rick was just bluffing and lied about it. That makes more sense. Rick's pulled out of the jelly and basically cries uncle in his face with a spear. Then he goes back on that and goes on a long arrogant rant that he's not beat, during which Birdperson could have easily killed him. But good, it's explained that he was only planning on arresting him. Finally, Rick asks, "Geez, BP, why do you even do anything for these guys? They're awful to you." Birdperson's caught off guard and desperately lies to him that they're his friends. Why would he believe that? I'm expected to believe that his culture loves bird poop, even though it obviously stink. Rick puts his arm back on him, and he says that Birdperson has stamina and courage if he kept hanging around people who were so mean to him, and stalked him out here at that. Doesn't that mean that Scourge has stamina and courage? He stuck around with the evil twins even when they treated him like dirt. Pat tried to kill him 4 times in 1 week and he still stayed with them for months. Rick has to be trying to just manipulate Birdperson to like him, because why else would he uncharacteristically apologize for trying to steal the jelly? Because he's trying to make him like him. And he says that he might someday say that was a Jerry move. Rick shakes his hand and tells Birdperson that they can work together on the battlefield, and then he can turn Rick into those guys who would sell him for a funnier newspaper to line their cage. Logically, it turns out one of the Gromflamites had the foresight to wear boots for the occasion so that he could be immune to stepping on the pointy-headed children. And he's humanized because he says it'd still mess him up emotionally. And it's realistic that one of the other invaders had intel on these guys, so he already knew that their kid army would have pointed heads. Or hats, I guess. Why does it have to be children if they can just wear hats? I don't remember a baby Birdperson being like this. Then after a rumble, one of them's humanized again by complaining that they're gonna find his body wearing booties. And we see a giant straw mecha of Rick's show up, and how'd he make that so fast? So what's forcing them to keep running on the conveyor belt? That alone powers... There must be a lot of magic here. Rick says to release the flying soldiers, and the other's confused that supposedly Birdperson commandeered a machine of death when he's a boring weirdo. So what's stopping the Gromflamites from trying to invade this place again? Rick's not always going to be here to protect it. This is pointless. Rick and Birdperson are sent out of a vehicle destroyed by a laser, and he's told to go to the room of the invaders' leader. He creatively reflects some laser at a soldier with pieces of wood, with hopefully a mirror in front of it, that just looks wood-colored. Otherwise, they make no sense. Then fortunately, in even more good writing, the leader of the Gromflamites asks why they don't just nuke them because they're getting stomped out there. And he's told it's too inhumane. That explains why the more advanced-looking Galactic Federation didn't just nuke the spear wielders. Birdperson threatens to kill him, and it reveals that, as I expected all along, since Rick was first seen running and asking for help, they didn't want to invade the planet now, and that was a plan for later. And Rick just led them here by accident. Lucky for Rick, Birdperson's loyal enough to Rick at this point to call the leader a liar and Rick his friend, and throw something at the leader to defeat him. It makes sense because Birdperson's been lonely and friendless his whole life, and Rick was the first person to be nice to him in a rare moment of decency. So he's desperate enough to keep liking Rick and seeing him as his friend. Though I assumed he was just acting like he sympathized with him to manipulate him into not trying to kill him anymore when he really just wanted to steal the jelly. After all, he just took his arm off at that point. Why would I actually care about Birdperson after that? But now he seems to. He shows appreciation for Birdperson's rage, and it turns out the claw of the leader landed on a ship-wide self-destruct button, which I guess was programmed as a last resort kamikaze attack against an opposing army. It doesn't seem to make any sense that Birdperson's telling Rick to kill him quick. He doesn't even try to explain it. Rick says, "Birdperson, I can't. I actually like you. You know how rare that is?" He tells him to trust him and stab him with a spear. How'd he survive this? What kind of a gambit is this? It makes sense that Rick's shouting the word trust after saying gah, because he's trying to motivate himself to do it more. Then all of a sudden, the vulture guy comes back with a vengeance, tearing a hole in the roof, asking who robbed him of a fattened soul. So this was the gambit to get him to save the day. Lucky for Rick, he can outrun him. And he's not omniscient enough to know it was Rick who attacked him, even though he was omniscient enough to know to come here immediately. I guess he can sense right when he's going to die, but doesn't know what exactly attacked him. He kills the invaders with fire breath as Rick runs away carrying Birdperson. Okay, this was awesome to see. I guess that justifies the vulture guy's scene from earlier. As needlessly creepy and out of nowhere as that scene was, it was better to have that scene and have this feel like a satisfying Chekhov's gun, than to have him first show up here and annoy me with a confusing Deus Ex Machina. Instead, it got my confusion out of the way early. A lot of things come out of nowhere in real life, so it's not like it's guaranteed bad writing. We cut ahead to later, where Birdperson explains that for his heroics in battle, his people acknowledged him as a man, egg or no egg. Wait, he clearly showed his people he had the egg. It's just that Rick broke it, in front of witnesses. That's not fair. Rick says, "Yeah, they told me I'm a man too, for what it's worth." Birdperson says, "You said masculinity is a myth." And Rick says, What, turn down being an adult bird? I'm not an idiot here. Rick feels awkward about having to leave Birdperson and hopes he won't try to stop him. Birdperson admits that he'd miss him, and Rick says, "Look, I can really use a friend if you want to join me on my adventures. Taking down governments, meeting cowboys." Birdperson naturally sets up first that his place is here, to show his people he can help them, because he's used to living here instead. Rick says that the man he saw on the battlefield has nothing to prove to them. So naturally, this changes his mind because he's lonely and he goes into the portal with him. Then we see a huge 2 pages showing a montage of various adventures they had together. I guess I'll just mention the most interesting ones to me. There's one time Rick shows a match to a bunch of cavemen and one of them's holding a gun. We see Rick transform into an animal trying to arrogantly pounce on a giant cat. We see Rick, Birdperson, and Squanchy play in a rock band that's got the horrible name of The Flush Curtains. I saw that name before. That was the title of one of the Rick and Morty Presents stories. I'm so glad I know the context for it. Knowing Rick and Morty, I thought it was being literal. And then we see Rick helping Santa. Then Rick tells Morty that he misses Birdperson and cries, and Morty asks why he's crying because all he saw was him looking at Birdperson's poop for almost half an hour. Why was Morty standing there the whole time? I really hate that Braincules explodes. That was needlessly gory to see. But at least it was amusing to see Rick mention a shower planet. The plan of Hatropes is really stupid, but at least it's being used in such an over-the-top silly way that it's clear the writers are just making fun of it. And if the multiverse is so big, then anything's possible. This issue is better than I was worried it would be. I didn't think Rick would be a part of it at all. I thought it'd be a Birdperson solo adventure. Or at least show us the adventure that another version of Summer had with them. But thankfully, despite the title just being Birdperson, the writer had a lot more sense than I expected and did everything he could right with this. It starts out showing us just enough to give us a good sense of what his backstory is. It makes sense that even his own species hate him, considering what a boring weirdo he is, which they even mention. It's his dialogue that's the problem. It's too formal. He was bullied as a kid, and even his mother wished she could change his personality. So it gave him a desperation to get people's respect. And the only way he could do that in his culture was to try to prove he was a man now, which happened to be by stealing the egg at some people birds. I love the people birds, they're a great idea. So we get to see how Birdperson first met Rick. The extra thing that really makes the story worth it, along with the fact that Rick's here the rest of the story. Rick accidentally led the Galactic Federation to his planet. At first, Birdperson hates him for breaking the egg as a creative way to beat the invaders. But then he catches them trying to steal the jelly because apparently it's naturally occurring portal juice. Which seems a bit unnecessary and confusing to me when he could have just wanted to sell the jelly for money and not actually have a broken portal gun. How'd he fix it anyways? That was fast. In a primitive planet. Is it a self-healing portal gun? I mean, that would explain the Rick Revenge Squad plot hole. Then Rick tells Birdperson that he shouldn't be so loyal to his species when they treat him like dirt, and it means so much to him that he sided with them that they end up becoming friends. And then they work together to destroy the invading army, using a straw mecha. Eventually, Birdperson is smart enough to take advantage of the fact that he knows how he's actually meant to die by getting Rick to try to kill him to summon a demonic vulture, which wanted to feast on his soul after he died on his wedding day. So the thing breathes fire to get rid of the rest of the invaders, who are just regular guys just doing their job. But I was too impressed with the demon being used to check up's gunmen to be upset. I guess when he mentions Birdperson dying at his wedding, he's actually referring to a wedding after his wedding to Tammy. Because even in the very same episode with the wedding, Tammy was shown to have brought him back to life as a cyborg. And I doubt the show will have him act soulless after Rick returns his mind to normal, or it'd be all for nothing. He was clearly back to life, so he by definition had his soul. So he was referring to a later wedding. My point is, this story did the best job it could with Birdperson. It wasn't just him, it started out explaining his backstory finally to try to make up for the boring beginning with just him in it. And then right after that, it explained how Rick met him. There was an epic story with high stakes where they protected his village. And the writers even did some take-thats at Birdperson instead of being totally oblivious to the idea that anyone wouldn't like him. Like a bad writer would be with their original character. The story was portraying him as childish and hated and being saddled with an army of babies as a result, which was actually satisfying at this point and helped soften the blow. I wish the story was called Birdperson and Rick. That'd made a way better title. Because it'd actually be indicative of the story. I wonder if it would have sold a lot better, and it got bad sales because of its mistake. If this was a bad backstory, I would have said it wasn't worth it and it was better to keep it all mysterious and let us think it up. But instead it makes perfect sense considering everything we know about Birdperson already. He's a bird person, so of course his culture would take advantage of that. And of course his people wouldn't like his personality either, rather than everyone in his species being like him.